In early American history, the division between people was not always based on race. In the 1600s, the colonies of North America were harsh and dangerous places. Life was filled with hunger, disease, and constant labor. Most people who lived in these colonies were poor. They worked long hours on farms and plantations. They struggled to survive in an unfamiliar land. Among them were Europeans who came as servants, and Africans who were brought by force. At first, these groups often shared the same hardships. They worked together. They suffered together. But over time, something changed. A system developed that separated people not only by wealth, but by the color of their skin. This system would become known as the color line. In the early colony of Virginia, landowners needed workers to grow tobacco. Tobacco farming required intense labor. Fields had to be cleared. Plants had to be harvested and processed. To meet this demand, the colony relied heavily on workers from Europe. These workers were known as indentured servants. They agreed to work for several years in exchange for passage to America. During their service, they had few rights. They could be punished. They could be sold to another master. They lived under strict control. At the same time, Africans were also brought to the colony. Many of them were forced into lifelong labor. However, in the earliest years, the legal difference between servants and enslaved people was not always clearly defined. Some Africans were able to gain freedom after years of work. Some were able to own land. This shows that racial slavery did not exist in the same rigid form at the beginning. It developed gradually. Life for workers in the colonies was extremely difficult. Food was often scarce. Disease spread quickly. Punishment was common. Workers were expected to obey their masters completely. If they resisted, they could be whipped or imprisoned. Both European servants and African laborers faced these dangers. They lived close to each other. They worked in the same fields. They experienced the same exhaustion. Because of this shared suffering, cooperation sometimes occurred. Workers ran away together. They protested together. They challenged authority together. For the wealthy landowners, this cooperation was a serious threat. If large numbers of workers united, they could demand better conditions. They could challenge the authority of the ruling class. This possibility created fear among colonial leaders. In 1676, that fear became reality. A major uprising took place in the colony of Virginia. The event became known as Bacon's Rebellion. The rebellion was led by Nathaniel Bacon. The participants included poor farmers, indentured servants, and enslaved people. They were angry about land shortages, high taxes, and lack of protection. They organized themselves into armed groups. They attacked government forces. They even burned the colonial capital. For the ruling class, this rebellion was a warning. It showed what could happen when poor people joined forces. The leaders realized that controlling workers required more than punishment. It required division. After the rebellion ended, colonial authorities began changing their policies. They introduced new laws that separated people by race. Poor white workers were given certain advantages. They were allowed to own weapons. They received land after completing their service. They gained more protection under the law. At the same time, restrictions on black people increased. African workers were denied legal rights. Their movement was controlled. Their labor became permanent. Over time, slavery became hereditary. This meant that the children of enslaved people would automatically be enslaved. These laws created a permanent system of inequality. Race became the foundation of social order. According to historian Howard Zinn, racism was not simply a natural feeling. It developed alongside economic interests. Colonial leaders used racial divisions to protect their power. They encouraged poor white workers to identify with wealthy landowners. Even if they were poor, they were told they belonged to a higher social group. This strategy reduced cooperation between workers. It made large-scale rebellion less likely, and it allowed the system of slavery to expand. By the 1700s, slavery had become a central part of the colonial economy. Plantations depended on enslaved labor. Trade networks depended on enslaved labor. Wealth depended on enslaved labor. The color line had become deeply rooted in society. The system created in the colonial period did not disappear quickly. It continued for generations. It influenced laws, culture, and social structures. Even after slavery was abolished in the 1800s, racial inequality remained a major issue. Understanding the origins of the color line helps explain how these systems developed. It shows how economic power and social divisions shaped American history, and it reminds us that history is not only about events. It is about the systems created by human decisions.